My name is Sam Bankman-Fried. 3 years ago, I was worth $26 billion. Forbes called me the richest person under 30. World leaders took my calls. I rubbed shoulders with celebrities, politicians, and the world's most powerful people. Today, I'm writing this from a federal prison cell, serving 25 years for what the judge called one of the biggest financial frauds in American history. But here's what nobody knows, what I've never told anyone until now. The empire didn't crumble because of bad investments or market crashes. It didn't fail because crypto winter hit harder than expected. FTX collapsed because of one decision I made at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November 2022. A decision so reckless, so driven by pure desperation and ego, that it vaporized $32 billion in a single day. This is my confession, the real story, the one that will make you understand how a MIT graduate, a supposed genius, became the most hated man in crypto. Let me start where it really began, not with FTX, but with the moment I realized I was untouchable. It was 2021. Bitcoin was hitting all-time highs. My trading firm, Alameda Research, was printing money faster than I could count it. FTX, my exchange, was processing billions in trades daily. I was on magazine covers, giving TED Talks, promising to give away my entire fortune. But behind the scenes, something darker was growing. Call it arrogance. Call it a messiah complex. I started believing my own hype. Sam, you can't keep using FTX customer funds for Alameda trades. Caroline Ellison, my on and off girlfriend and Alameda's CEO, warned me during one of our late-night strategy sessions at our Bahamian penthouse. I remember laughing. Actually laughing. Caroline, we're making them 20% returns. They should be thanking us. That sentence, those 12 words, should have been my wake-up call. Instead, it became my operating philosophy. I convinced myself that I wasn't stealing. I was optimizing. I wasn't committing fraud. I was maximizing utility. The customers didn't know their deposits were being used as collateral for increasingly risky bets. They trusted me with their life savings, their retirement funds, their children's college money. I betrayed every single one of them. Here's something I've never admitted publicly. I wasn't just addicted to money or success. I was addicted to the feeling of playing God with other people's futures. Every morning, I'd wake up and check Alameda's positions. We were leveraged 100-to-1 on some trades. One wrong move could wipe us out. But that's what made it thrilling. We're up $2 billion this quarter. I'd tell my parents during our weekly calls. What I didn't tell them, we were using $10 billion of customer funds to do it. The numbers became abstract. When you're moving billions daily, you stop thinking about the grandmother in Ohio who put her Social Security into FTX, or the young father in California who invested his daughter's college fund in your platform. Gary Wang, my co-founder and former MIT roommate, started raising red flags in mid-2022. Sam, the code you made me write, it's essentially giving Alameda a $65 billion credit line from FTX. This is illegal. I remember my exact response. Gary, we're making more money than God. Illegal is a social construct. Even writing that now from my prison cell makes me sick. But that's who I became. That's the monster I created. By late 2022, the cracks were showing. Luna had collapsed. Three Arrows Capital imploded. The crypto winter was brutal, and suddenly, everyone wanted their money back. But here's the thing nobody understood. There was no money. Not really. We had created an elaborate shell game. FTX customer deposits flowed to Alameda. Alameda used those funds for increasingly desperate trades, trying to plug holes that kept getting bigger. When customers wanted to withdraw, we'd use new deposits to pay them out. It was a Ponzi scheme. I just refused to call it that. The breaking point came when CoinDesk published that leaked balance sheet showing Alameda's precarious position. Within hours, Changpeng Zhao, CEO of Binance, tweeted that they were selling their FTT tokens. I was in my Bahamas office when I got the call. Sam, we have $16 billion in withdrawal requests. We only have $4 billion in liquid assets. My hands were shaking as I hung up. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading for months. Here's the part of the story I've never told anyone. Not my lawyers, not my family, not even Caroline. At 2:47 a.m. on November 8, 2022, I made the decision that destroyed everything. I was alone in my office, surrounded by empty Adderall bottles and cold coffee cups. The withdrawal requests were pouring in. Twitter was exploding with FUD about FTX's solvency. My phone was ringing nonstop, investors, employees, my parents. I had two choices. Admit defeat, file for bankruptcy, face the music, make one final, massive trade to try to save everything. I chose option 2. I personally authorized the transfer of the last $4 billion in customer funds, money that was supposed to be safely segregated, to Alameda for one final trade. A leveraged bet on Bitcoin that would either save us all or destroy everything. The trade failed. Bitcoin crashed 15% that day. In 6 hours, I had lost the final $4 billion. Game over. Last month, a reporter from 60 Minutes somehow got approval to interview me in federal prison. What I told him will shock you because it reveals the depth of my delusion, and something even worse. Do you feel guilty about what you did? He asked. I paused for a long time. Then I said something that even surprised me. I feel guilty about getting caught. If that Bitcoin trade had worked, if we'd made back the money, everyone would still think I was a genius. The customers would have been made whole. I'd still be the golden boy of crypto. The reporter's jaw dropped. So you don't feel guilty about the fraud itself? I feel guilty that I failed them. But I don't feel guilty about trying to save them, even if the methods were questionable. That's when it hit me. Even after losing everything, even facing 25 years in prison, I was still rationalizing, still believing my own lies. But here's what finally broke me, what made me want to write this confession. Last week, I received a letter from Margaret Thompson, a 67-year-old retired teacher from Kansas. She had invested her entire $180,000 retirement savings in FTX 3 weeks before we collapsed. Dear Sam, I trusted you. I watched your interviews, read about your philanthropy, believed you were different from other crypto brothers. I put my entire retirement, 40 years of teaching, into your platform because you promised it was safe. I now work at Walmart, greeting customers for $12 an hour. I'll probably die working because of what you did. I just want you to know that your decisions destroyed my life. I don't expect you to care, but I needed you to know. Margaret, I read that letter 17 times. Then I threw up. That's when I realized the true cost of my optimization. Margaret wasn't a number on a spreadsheet. She was a human being whose trust one had weaponized for my own ego. There are thousands of Margarets. Millions of them, people who trusted me with their futures, and I gambled it away on my messianic delusions. But here's the most shocking part, the revelation that will change everything you think you know about the FTX collapse. I wasn't the only one who knew. My parents, both Stanford law professors, knew about the commingling of funds by early 2022. They didn't just know, they helped structure some of the legal entities we used to hide it. The Bahamas government knew. They were taking millions in donations to look the other way while we operated with virtually no oversight. Several major institutional investors knew. They saw our books, understood the risks, but stayed invested because the returns were too good to pass up. Even some regulators suspected something was wrong, but chose not to investigate too deeply because crypto was bringing billions in tax revenue. I wasn't just a rogue operator. I was the front man for a system of willful blindness that went all the way to the top. Here's what the media won't tell you, what the prosecutors don't want to acknowledge. I could have done this forever if I hadn't gotten greedy. The customer funds I was using, most of them never would have been withdrawn. Studies show that 80% of crypto investments are held long-term. I was essentially running a fractional reserve system, just like every traditional bank. The difference is banks have FDIC insurance and regulatory oversight. I had neither. If I had limited the leverage to 5-to-1 instead of 100-to-1, if I had kept $5 billion in reserves instead of gambling everything, FTX would still be operating today. I'd still be worth billions. The customers would have their money. My crime wasn't just fraud. It was stupidity. Unforgivable, breathtaking stupidity driven by a God complex that made me believe I was smarter than risk itself. You might wonder why I'm confessing all this now. Why risk making my situation worse? The truth is, I have nothing left to lose. But more importantly, I have something to gain. the possibility of preventing the next Sam Bankman-Fried. Because here's what terrifies me. What keeps me awake in my 6x8 cell every night. There are hundreds of crypto companies operating exactly like FTX did. Same fractional reserves, same commingling of funds, same leveraged betting with customer money. They're just better at hiding it. The next collapse will make FTX look small. When it happens, not if, when millions more people will lose everything they have. And some 30-year-old sociopath in Silicon Valley will go from billionaire to federal prisoner, wondering how they convinced themselves they were saving the world while destroying it. If you're reading this and you have money on any crypto exchange, Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, any of them, withdraw it. Tonight. Not because they're all fraudulent, though some are, but because the temptation to use customer funds is too great when you're sitting on billions in assets and facing a margin call. I was celebrated as a genius, a philanthropist, a revolutionary. Time magazine called me one of the most influential people in the world. I was none of those things. I was a 30-year-old with unlimited access to other people's money and no adult supervision. The crypto industry will tell you that FTX was an anomaly, that I was a bad actor who doesn't represent their values. They're lying. I wasn't special. I wasn't uniquely evil or uniquely stupid. I was the inevitable result of a system designed to enrich insiders at the expense of everyone else. The only difference between me and the next crypto collapse is that I got caught. 25 years later. I'll be 57 when I get out of prison, assuming I serve my full sentence. Margaret Thompson will be long gone by then. So will most of the people whose lives I destroyed. I'll have missed my parents' golden years, any chance at having a family, the best decades of my life. Was it worth it? For those few years when I was the king of crypto, when I was worth $26 billion, when world leaders took my calls. No, it wasn't worth a single day. But here's the most honest thing I can tell you. If I could go back to that moment at 2:47 a.m. on November 8th, knowing everything I know now, I'm not sure I'd make a different choice. And that's the most terrifying confession of all. Sam Bankman-Fried is currently serving a 25-year sentence at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. This confession was compiled from prison interviews and written correspondence conducted over 6 months. FTX customers are still awaiting full restitution of their funds.